Not every day goes as planned. Just take a look at how the mother bear praised the girl for saving her wailing bear cub. Elisa was getting ready for her last mountain walk before starting basic training. She believed that her many years of mountain living would provide her an advantage during training, so she was both anxious and excited. She was going to bid her house farewell for the time being, as she had done numerous times in the past. She heard horrible screaming as she abruptly ascended far into the hills. She had never heard sounds like these in all the years she had lived there and gone hiking. She carefully moved closer to the source of the commotion, and she was startled by what she saw. It was a cub bear. The cub was sitting on a ledge halfway down a high rock where it had fallen. The cub was calling for its mother and wailing, knowing it was in serious danger. Since Elisa could hear the noises from the top of the cliff, she surmised that the mother bear was not far away. It turned out that the mother bear, anxious to get to her youngster, was pacing impatiently at the top. Sand and boulders began to fall toward the cub below as she made multiple attempts to descend the cliff. Elisa stood back and observed. Bears are generally skilled climbers, but this cliff was excessively steep, making the descent considerably more difficult than the ascent. The mother bear made multiple attempts to descend, but she kept going straight down near the edge of the cliff. When the mother bear realized she couldn't get to her youngster, she freaked out. It was painful to hear the mother and cub cry out now as they made a last-ditch effort to be together. Because the bear's cries now mirrored the mother's own fear over her cub, Elisa could relate to the mother's pain. Elisa stared in horror as she started to scale the edge once more. Then catastrophe hit. Due to its small size and lack of experience, the bear cub was only able to ascend a short distance before losing its balance and falling back onto the ledge. The sound of the cub hitting the ledge was terrible, but at least it was safe from harm. However, one of its back paws broke as it fell because it became lodged in a crack. Now entangled and obviously in discomfort, the youngster was attempting to extricate itself. However, the more it struggled, the riskier its condition became. It ran the chance of falling and getting even more seriously hurt. Elisa was unable to observe the awful events that led to the cub's demise. Her instinct told her to take action. She was a skilled rock climber, but she didn't have any gear with her. She would have to waste time traveling back to her home, which was too far away to get the required equipment. Her abilities were everything. She felt she had to attempt, even though it was a risky undertaking with huge stakes. She had a rope in her backpack that she needed to tie off to save the bear cub. Without any safety equipment, she would have to climb. After clearing out everything that wasn't absolutely necessary, Elisa let her parents know where she was. She clarified that she would check in an hour, but that she was not in danger. She didn't want to bother them, but in case something happened, it was crucial that someone knew where she was. The distraught mother bear had to descend, and then move horizontally to reach the cub's paw, because it would be dangerous to approach it too closely. With caution, Elisa started to fall over the brink. Especially without the appropriate safety gear, it felt far more dangerous than her typical climbs. This was going to be one of the hardest climbs of her life because the cliff was abnormally smooth and provided very few handholds or footholds. She descended slowly, clinging on the tops of her toes and fingertips only. Her foot slid abruptly. She had to work very hard to get her equilibrium back, which was a very scary experience. She told herself that she would probably encounter far more horrific circumstances while serving in the military, and that she just needed to persevere. Sweat was streaming down her back, but the stakes were too high for her to afford to stop. A stumble could result from any hesitation. At last, she leveled up with the ledge and got ready to move sideways. It felt even more terrifying to be climbing at this point, but at least she could feel the ledge beneath her feet, even if it was considerably narrower than what she had been clinging to. The last 30 minutes had seemed to go on forever, but as Elisa got closer to the cub, the noises coming from the mother bear overhead got louder. From above, the mother's agitation increased, sending more rocks and sand flying, increasing the risk of Elisa's climb. She had no idea when one of the big stones might fall. The mother bear's concern was evident from the sounds coming from above, but Elisa knew she needed to proceed cautiously. She knew that the mother bear could be lethal if they came into contact with each other, so she was quite glad that the cliff kept them apart during those tense moments. The cub appeared to get restless due to the mother's worry. It strained, attempting to break free from Elisa's hold. The cub was small enough to hurt her accidentally, but she was also worried that its frantic movements would cause it to fall off the cliff. With great care, Elisa leaned her back against the cliff and spoke softly to soothe the cub. Eventually, after a while, it calmed down. Her soft speech and collected manner appeared to calm the scared animal. Approaching and examining the paw wedged in the crack, she thought that perhaps she could twist it just right to release it without hurting it anymore. When the bear cub gave her permission to touch him, Elisa took the rope from her backpack and wrapped it around his waist and under his front paws to ensure he wouldn't fall in the other direction. The next development was very poignant. The young bear cub stopped crying and became quiet. Even the mother bear became silent as she observed from above. The cub appeared to find solace in Elisa's company, as evidenced by the way he pressed his head against her chest as she carefully fastened the rope around him. Elisa was moved to tears by the small bear cub's gesture, which resembled an embrace. The pressure to get the cub to safety increased at that same time. She needed to rescue him. After tying the rope around her own body, Elisa gave the cub a gentle head massage and carefully removed his back paw from the crack. The cub made a little squeak of anguish, but there was no sign of a fracture. His paw was injured and had some fur pulled off it, but nothing too serious. The difficult issue now was to figure out how to get them both out of this predicament. With the cub strapped to her, there was no chance she could make it back up the cliff. Not only would it throw her off balance and prevent her from climbing, the cub was already very hefty despite his small size. Elisa was aware of her limitations. Climbing was not an option. Their lives might be at stake for both of them. There was no other way to save their lives, yet going down would take them away from the mother bear and complicate their reunion. Getting them safely to firm ground was the only way to restore the cub to his mother. Elisa had to drop the cub to the ground with the rope fastened to both of them. It was difficult to find appropriate vantage points and grips, but she prayed that her strength would hold. With the rope in her hands, she cautiously leaned over the brink. The cub didn't like that. It may have appeared to him that his rescuer was abruptly abandoning him on the edge. The bear must have been terrified, but he calmed down when he realized he wasn't falling. Elisa released the rope slowly, allowing the cub to descend gracefully in the direction of the earth. In order to tie the rope with her body weight, she had to lean back as far as she could. The cub was weighty, even though his weight was less than that of a human. It required every bit of her expertise to safely lower him. Everything was going according to plan when, all of a sudden, things started to go wrong. The youngster began to squirm and wiggle around as he got closer to the ground, eager about his impending freedom. Elisa found it more difficult to hold her posture as a result, and she ended up perilously near the edge. She then saw the rope loosen. She noticed the cub was securely on the ground as she looked down. It was her turn now, but she needed to take a quick break first. Her shoulders hurt from the sheer amount of work it took to cradle the cub, and her arms were shaking. For a moment, Elisa sat and caught her breath. Her heartbeat sped up again as soon as it started to steady, and she lost the feeling that the ground was solid under her. Just a few minutes ago, the ledge started to give way. The bear cub was hanging on, even though it had succeeded in making a hole with its paw. So she made an effort to ignore it as the earth appeared ready to give way. She moved to the side and started to descend, carefully since she didn't want to take the chance of landing on the bear cub. She couldn't afford a steep fall at this time, although a longer pause would have been wonderful. There were more grips on this cliff than on the gentle incline of the peak, but her body was starting to tire. Even though it seemed like hours had passed since she began her descent, the ground was still quite far away when she peered down. It would be useless for her to jump. She might not die, but she would undoubtedly break several bones, and her career would end before she had a chance. She had the impression of being on bricks from an entire home. While he was tugging her down, she cautiously removed her backpack and found a place with enough space for safe movement. She had to lose the excess weight. She checked on the bear cub first, then set the backpack down on the ground. Even though it didn't feel as heavy, it didn't seem like the earth was getting any closer. Elisa's legs gave up as she reached for the next ledge, and her foot struck firm ground. She was astounded that she had descended thus far. This extraordinarily powerful woman just fell to the ground. It felt great to lie on the ground, but sometimes she wondered if she would ever be safe. She withdrew into the shadows, breathing deeply, and used her every remaining strength to retreat. She didn't have the strength to get up and go look for her backpack, which was someplace out of reach, but she would have given anything for a sip of water. The bear cub approached her and started to crawl on top of her. When he got close to her, he appeared to be much happier and less afraid. She released the fastener from his waist. She was too tired to give the bear cub a hug and pet. He halted, stood on his hind legs, and pricked up his ears as he rolled around next to her. The sound of crunching branches and rustling leaves reached Elisa's ears as well. Through the forest, something was getting closer. Then a great panic overcame Elisa. A she-bear appeared out of the woods, extremely close. It is likely that she noticed where Elisa had taken the cub. The she-bear circled the edge of the cliff and descended the mountain to join them. Elisa looked up, and the she-bear was not happy with her. Would Elisa's nice deed be her last? However, the woman received no response from the she-bear. The cub went to the mother bear as soon as she appeared from the jungle. Elisa couldn't contain her tears as she realized it was time for her to go, as she swiftly gave her child a hug, and they played happily on the ground. The she-bear appeared to disregard Elisa's attempts to sit up, concentrating instead on her youngster and displaying no aggressive behavior. Elisa chose to take a chance. She was too tired to engage in repartee with Elisa. Despite her attempts to push him away, he persisted. A mother bear, what could she do? However, she had no idea what would come next. After saving the weeping bear cub, the girl observed as Mama Bear looked around for something. This time, Elisa was the one who was unable to decipher the animal's intentions, so she attempted to avoid making any abrupt movements. But she was shocked by what happened next. The bear came back, her mouth full of something. Elisa had left her backpack there, just next to her. Subsequently, Mama Bear retreated and took a secure seat. Elisa found it hard to believe. With haste, she unzipped the bag and took out a bottle of water. She drank several gulps of the cold water. The thermos was functional despite being dented. They sat in contented silence. Mama Bear appeared to be watching over her while she healed. Now that Elisa had protected her cub, Mama Bear was expressing her gratitude and ensuring Elisa was okay before allowing her to move on. Lying next to a bear and her cub at the base of an enormous cliff and just relaxing with them was an amazing experience. Elisa soon heard voices. She knew it was her parents calling. They were drawing near. Though it appeared that Mama Bear knew it was time to say goodbye, Elisa was concerned that she could react negatively to the entrance of other people. Before retreating back into the jungle, Mama Bear walked over to Elisa and gave her a gentle pat on the leg. The youngster rolled onto Elisa, giving her a shoulder nudge. The tiny one nestled his head against her shoulder, and she gave him a tender final hug. Subsequently, the mother cub called, and they both vanished from view into the trees. If it weren't for the massive bear footprints surrounding her, folks might have had their doubts about this amazing account. It was difficult to believe that anyone would believe it. Her parents, however, were just happy that she wasn't hurt. They had been concerned about Elisa's message and were looking forward to her indication that she was safe. She appreciated their care, though. They left the jungle when her father climbed back up to get what she had tossed out of her rucksack. Elisa carried this experience with her throughout her basic training and even into combat. She always found the fortitude to conquer any hurdles when she thought back to her bravery that day throughout trying times in her life. The bear cub was all grown up and even had his own family when she went back to those hills. Elisa could not have said for sure, but she could not have felt more satisfied than she did as she watched them. It was always a really unique sense for her to feel as though the bear could recognize her from a distance. After watching the story above, do you have any thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. If you enjoyed our video, please like, subscribe, and share our channel. That's all about today's stories. See you next time.